Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm Iconic. Today, we're going to explore the unique experiences, challenges, and strength of autistic individuals. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, Jenni Guthrie, who's an autistic social worker, writer, trainer, and principal curriculum lead at Frontline. Jenni brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our conversation, and we're excited to explore a range of topics related to autism, social work, writing, training, and curriculum development. Join us as we dive into some fantastic and important topics and learn from her insights and expertise. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you become interested in social work, writing, training, and all of that sort of stuff that you're doing right now?
Cool, yeah, sure. I guess it just I had had experience of having a social worker when I was younger, and I was interested in working, I guess, with other people. That's kind of from the social work side. In relation to neurodivergence, I guess I always knew I was different and didn't quite fit in or anything like that, and there was something around connecting with difference and with others who may feel that they were not kind of part of the plan or part of the script that everybody else seemed to be following. So so I didn't always have a name for it, I guess. I didn't know where it all kind of sat, but I knew who I was in that respect as well. So an awful lot of kind of trying to work out what the world meant and how I was part of it was a huge part of me growing up, which didn't always have great consequences. Hence my social work involvement, and through my first social worker, who had quite a positive, lasting impression on me, I really I was curious to know how I could maybe, I guess, also do the same for others who may need it. So yeah, I guess that was why.
So it seems like being a person that has been impacted by a system like social care has influenced your career decisions to go join social services and be a social worker. Did you have a really good experience with your social worker, or was it that you wanted to be like her and be so helpful, or was it did you have a negative experience and you didn't want other young people to go through the same thing?
So I had, for the social work I'm thinking about, I had a really subtle but impactful experience in a good way. The systems, on the other hand, I had an incredibly traumatic experience, and just how that has kind of influenced my thinking of what I could see was someone who was consistent and calm against my rage at times, and just helped me navigate where I needed to go at that time. Was a game changer for me, and I could, I guess but they didn't do anything like amazing or kind of, they were themselves, and they subtly just enabled me to learn how to be me, when others were really kind of making things really tough. So yeah, they had a big influence on me as a person, and what I realized I had the potential to be as well.
So can you discuss how some of your challenges that individuals with autism may face when accessing social services, and how social services can be better for people with autism?
So I guess for me, this really isn't, again, this goes back to how social work should be practiced, full stop, which is relational. And I think in the melee of everything of human life is so predictably unpredictable. Just having to navigate different systems that don't always speak to each other in a helpful way, or just are in conflict with each other. But then you've got this person in the middle who's just lost, just trying to navigate all of these things. When I say systems, I'm talking from, you know, interpersonal relationships all the way up to socio-political systems. You know, social work is pretty much a thankless task, and I guess I'll go and tell me the question again, because I've now gone into a whole load of different things. It was more about kind of autism, isn't it? Yeah, just about, yeah. So I guess the difficulties when you're autistic is that so I was a young person, and I was already kind of battling my own identity, and you know, and hadn't worked out the best ways of communication for myself. So very often it was very reactive and things like that. So if you are also working within a system that's very reactive and focusing on risk all the time, and risk is necessary to focus on sometimes, but not seeing that person within that was really hard. So I think that was my experience, most definitely, and in different settings as well. Because when we think about social work or social care, we often, I guess the go-to is people going to families' homes. Well, for me, that wasn't the case. So I was in an NHS setting, and it was very clinical and very restrictive and very it was very traumatizing, actually. And so I guess it was just recognizing that people's needs are different in different contexts, and social work can work within a variety of different contexts as well. So one size most definitely doesn't fit all. And when I was an adult, the involvement with children's services became a thing when I was looking for assessment need in relation to my own children, who are also autistic, or multiply neurodivergent, and just the, you know, and even though I knew the systems myself, just being a parent within all that, being an autistic parent, and recognizing that things were not, you know, assumptions being made around what parenting actually is was quite stark for me. So so I guess it is difficult when you are struggling to kind of attend to meaning that is not clear, behavior that is not clear, and then your own ways of communicating and behavior is not understood by the other person. That's really hard.
Yeah, I can relate to that, as being like an autistic individual with also ADHD. It's like, I feel like everything is like, risk is focused on, but it shouldn't be the main priority. The main priority is understanding your young person. I feel like when one of the factors that bring risk behaviors and are not being understood, especially for autistic individuals, when we already have problems with communication and social communication, and we're like really struggling with it. But this, like me shouting at you, like, people will focus on the shouting, but me shouting at you is the only way that I can get it out. I can't sit down and have a conversation with you. If I could, I would. But I'm not trying to be intimidating. I'm not trying to be threatening, but this is the best way I can communicate. And me communicating at all is good. I feel like people be like, even after the conversation, after the person, they will eventually calm down. You can sit down and have a conversation with them. At the end, you might bring it up, be like, oh, next time, why don't you try this, that? But I feel like people forget, like, care is supposed to be bespoke. Yeah. It's tailored to the individual. It's not just like, this worked for my other autistic young person, let me just throw it at you. And I'm like, no. Like, for example, one of the other young people that I know is, I love pastel colors. I can't handle bright colors. But this other individual loves bright colors and can't handle muted colors. And people are like, oh, I know it's like a very like random example, but people have expectations that everything fits in a box.
Yeah. And I think that is part of the issue in terms of how can social workers improve their practice in working with autistic people is there is no one answer. And in a profession where that is frantic and ever changing, and the goalposts keep changing, in that way, in terms of lots of different things for social workers, you know, so I definitely don't deny that. I've experienced that as a social worker, you know, your resources, your funding, your time that you get to do anything or anything like that, and the statutory expectations get in the way, basically, of doing the relational work. But the relational work is still possible. But if you go in and you treat everybody as a homogenous group, it's not going to work. So I can't give you one tool, and I can't give you one solution, and I can't give you one insight that will change everything in your practice of working with autistic people.
Yeah.
But it might help you start to think and be curious about what the person you're working with may need from you.
Yeah, like there was like this individual, like he's the service manager where I live. Like his name is Augustine. No, his actual name is not. I call him Augustine. His name is Anthony, and he thinks exactly like that. He says like whenever like also any sort of behavior that a young person portrays is an unmet need that needs to be met. It's like people usually go right in. It's like, for example, I told him about like the time I've stopped doing that, but I found a different way to growl at people. But I used to growl at people, but people used to take that as like, oh, she's going to be aggressive. But it's more coming from a place of vulnerability. That's the conclusion that we came from. We explored it together. And I feel like I don't believe that young people can be violent. They have violent tendencies, but it's not them. It's not violent. A child is born into this world so pure. It's what they learn, it's what they use to survive. And people forget that. They think because you take them out of a traumatic situation does not mean that it's going to be like, okay, it's going to be like fairies and sprinkly glitter and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't work there. It's a process. Like, and when you come out of your home, I know for a fact there's no manual. It would be great if there was a manual, but there's no way to know, no way to trust. And especially if you're past your formative years, it's much harder to learn and trust new people and explore the world that you're integrating to. I don't think people with trauma can reintegrate because they've never had that safe, loving, caring environment. And if they did, it's usually manipulative or used for an evil cause. We're going to now delve into the unique strengths and challenges that autistic individuals face. We'll discuss how autism can impact social communication, sensory processing, and executive function, and how these differences can be both strengths and challenges. We'll also highlight the importance of recognizing and valuing the strength of autistic individuals, such as their attention to detail, creativity, and unique perspectives. And then finally, we'll talk about the importance of creating more inclusive and accessible environments for autistic individuals. We'll explore how we can make space, activities, and interaction more sensory friendly, as well as how to support individuals with autism in developing their social communication skills, as well as discussing the role of education and advocacy by creating a more inclusive society for all individuals, regardless of their neurodiversity. By the end of this section, we'll hope that you have a deeper understanding of autism, be inspired to take actions towards creating a more compassionate and inclusive world for all individuals, regardless, keyword, of their neurodiversity. So how do you think the media and popular culture have shaped the public's understanding of autism? And what are some common misconceptions or stereotypes that you see perpetrated in these contexts?
Yeah, so there's a stereotypical portrayal, I think, that still permeates kind of media representation of autism, and that's the kind of white young male who's very good at a particular thing, you know. The Good Doctor is an example. Rain Man is an example. There's you know, there's that a sense of that they're only valuable for that amazing thing that they do, whatever it is, usually intelligence, and then pretty much, you know, not useful for everything else. And that's, you know, and that's one's been going on for years, isn't it? That it's or children. So the other portrayal is that it's children, you know, and it's not just in media. I think in terms of TV or film, it's in advertising or kind of focus on, say, campaigns or things like that. There's a big, huge focus on children, and it's like people forget that we grew up
as autistic individuals.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple of more recent ones that are hopeful, you know, that autistic female presenting characters, for example, you know, to kind of challenging that gender bias. But I think there's still a kind of a binary approach to these things, and I would say in terms of we're still sticking with a white middle class kind of stereotypical approach in media, and it's something that really needs to change. I mean, saying that though, there's some really good, there's a great book by Tiffany Hartman around Black non-speaking children, which is fantastic. But it's like it stands out because there's so few other examples, and it's like we really need to be more intersected and inclusive in our kind of representation of autism in the media and beyond, in my view.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's like the NHS website of like how like diseases or like infections look on like a certain colored skin, but it doesn't show like, oh, what it could look like for a Black person or an Asian person, or different shades of Black or different shades of like brown. And it's like that. And I feel like when it comes to like executive function, I hate these terms, but I can't say it in a way without using these terms. Low functioning and high functioning, hate it.
Yeah.
But people always like in media portray like the BAME individuals with autism as really low functioning and unable to do something, which brings a lot of frustration, because like even if it's like for example, The Good Doctor, majority of people know who The Good Doctor is even without watching it. In the UK, I don't think you can watch it unless you have certain, not even Netflix or Disney Plus has it. So like I think it's I don't know. Anyway, digressing. But like it's just like everybody knows him for his intelligence and his like memory. And it also sets like unrealistic expectations on people who intellectual capabilities absolutely wonderful, like amazing to the point where it's like life-changing for others. It's like, but you know, the way that even if you have a photographic memory, the way that he sees things when he's like talking to his patient, that is like quite rare.
Yeah.
And it's portraying it to the fact like in a way that is like, oh, every other autistic person has this, you know, either you do or you don't. And it's like, it's not like that. It's like, and people also like, I feel like people also see like autistic individuals as these people that freak out constantly. I don't know about other people, but I freak out at everything. But in that sense, it's right. But like, it's like freaks out at every single thing. But people like, especially, that's another point. But like, especially like girls, but they're like good at masking. Yeah. You don't know, if I go outside and I'm there's sometimes where I can manage to struggle without showing it on my face, showing it with my body language. People that know me really well might notice a little small changes, but other than that. And I also think there's a lack of representation of autistic autistic representation when it comes to females. You don't see much, like everybody, like I feel like when it comes to intellectual like side of these representations, there's no like ways to look at it. They don't show the struggles, they just show the struggles to the most like normal autistic traits, the one that are most commonly associated, like, oh, this is too noisy, this is too bright, oh my god, they're gonna freak. Some people love bright lights, like some people will skim the hell out of there because they're so happy that there's bright flashing lights everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I feel like there needs to like, oh, what is it called when autistic traits don't get portrayed as they usually are?
Ooh, you're making me think about
it's like anyway, it'd be like, it's like something to do with pandas, or I'm associating with pandas, I don't know why. But like, how do you think, especially in schools, I feel like there's not a good understanding, even in specialist schools that are catering for autistic population, people with autism. I don't even think the schools are specialized enough in autism, or I don't understand it, do not have enough training. What do you think can be different for when it comes, like, what do you think are some of the key considerations when designing these environments, or like, it doesn't have to just be school, it has to be workplaces or stuff like that, to make it a neurodiverse friendly place?
So I think it kind of links to your last question, because to enable full inclusion, you have to have understanding. To enable understanding, you have to have a sense of acceptance that it's part and parcel of human diversity and of life, and but also that there's some, you have a role in this, there's something they need to do. And I'm talking about kind of people who are not autistic or neurodivergent. But before that, you need to have awareness, and it's the very fact that we have stereotypes still permeating all the way through our media or things, and it's not just like newspapers who will highlight if someone is autistic if they've done something in the criminal justice system. You know, there's still that perpetuation of lack of empathy, that lack of social connection, that lack of understanding others. Therefore, you are non-feeling, non-empathic, and you're just going to go and commit crime or do something bad to somebody, or be a loner, or those things are still permeated, whether we realize, others realize it or not, in our language, in everything. And until people are aware of that, I don't think you can move on to the next kind of layers on the inclusion ladder, can you? So it's stuff needs to change. There needs to be a real conscious effort of changing the language that describes autism. It's changing who holds the cognitive authority when it comes to what, you know, what do we mean by autism? So, for example, and what I mean by that is, it's not the media, it's not the kind of the neural kind of normative perceptions of behaviour or thinking and doing. It's, you know, it has to be informed and influenced by autistic people and autistic communities, but it has to be all the different autistic communities that are part of our culture. So it has to consider multiply neurodivergent people, because a lot of us are. It has to consider gender, it has to consider ethnicity, it has to consider age, it has to consider co-occurring.
Can you give me a minute, please? Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll come home see you. No. I'm sorry. Sorry, it's my error.
That's okay.
So yeah, sorry for interrupting. I'm so sorry that
That's all right. Yeah, I guess what I was saying was basically if you want to understand, you need to embrace and bring into your everyday the influence of autistic people, full stop, to really reach that level of understanding, to then start changing your own practice and embedding it into your own everyday, so that it becomes something that is accepted and included, part of what you do. I don't know if that makes sense, but also how you think. So it's we're definitely making strides in that in autism world. You know, we have more openly autistic researchers. We have more books about autism written by autistic authors. We've got more things like this. We've got podcasts going out. But whether it's reaching the right people, whether it's that motivation and that willingness to embrace that and adapt and change, you know, in the world of neurotypicality, that's a different story. That's what needs to change before we do anything else. But then, you know, on another level, there is no, as far as I'm concerned, there's no excuse for not looking at need. So with the social work hat on, you know, when you assess what somebody needs, you're looking at need, or you should be looking at need. You don't need a label attached to it. You don't need to understand where that's totally come from. You just need to know there's a need, and there's a need that needs to be addressed. And how are you going to do that? And 9 times out of 10, autistic need can be quite simply addressed if people are motivated to do that.
Yes, that was like so perfectly said, because everything comes down to motivation, or sorry, is loud outside, it's distracting me, I'm so sorry. It's everything comes back, if you want to make a change, if you're there in your career and I know there's some social workers out there who don't even want to be in their jobs, and they're like, as long as the bare minimum gets done, the statutory 6 weeks gets done, right, lovely, let's move on. And it's not like that. Everything needs to be bespoke to the young person. Everything comes back to, if you're going to put care into one phrase or something, or one word, bespoke. That's the main concept that needs to be remembered. Everything needs to be bespoke. Everything you do for the young person can easily be met, or talking to the right people will get it met. But the lack of effort by certain individuals to even understand, even trying to understand, is amazing. That's the foundation, trying to understand. I had this member, the director of the previous place that I used to live in, Jonathan. Everybody was like, oh, why do you get along with him? Because he has patience, which creates understanding, which creates good relationships. And that's why we have a good relationship. He will be like him and was he be like, we're having a tough time right now, but we're gonna get through this together. And we're gonna get this together. We'll have a conversation afterwards, and it's like it's never happened again. To understand, just take the time to sit down and listen. And like even when people are, especially like when people are trying to explain themselves to you, and they might be screaming, or they might be swearing, or it might be incoherent, right? But it's like they're going to calm down. Majority of the time they're going to calm down after all they said. Don't interrupt them, just listen. Even if you don't understand, and nod your head reassuringly. That might provoke anger in some young people, but some young people like it, that you're attentive, and then explore what you did not hear afterwards. And also, somebody swearing or like screaming is not, it doesn't make them incoherent. You're just choosing to tune in or tune out whenever you prefer. And it's not like that. It's like everything, if you listen to a young person, you'll know what the issue is, and then you'll know where to address it. If you are just basing off the professionals that see them from certain times, even if they look after them, it's like on 8-hour shifts, longest shift, 16 hours, right? What happens after the 16 hours? They go home. and there's a gap. Even if the next staff is going to fill you in, it's not the same. You need to talk to your young person, because you know who's always there for that young person? Themselves. And that's what I feel like people fail to realize. And that could, if you get autistic individuals, if individuals with autism involved in these practices, in your interview panels, in your, like, if you're just going to start something up, get somebody who's all like this, like a range of young people with absolutely different needs. That's going to be amazing. That's going to be phenomenal, because they're giving you insight that a professional can't give you. And if you think about like national autistic societies and stuff like that, people in managerial roles, are they even autistic? Or is there somebody with autism? The likelihood is probably not. The likelihood is probably not, because people are going to find a reason, no matter what it is. If they won't say he's autistic, they can't just go be like, oh, it's just autism, that's why we don't want you. They'll find a reason to say, no, you are incompetent because of your autism. Your autism diminishes your capabilities. I say this when I go to interviews. I say this at the very end. I may have 3 staff with me. I may have Joels. I may have neurodiverse needs. I may have complex needs, right? But it doesn't diminish my capabilities to perform a task or a role in its best capacity. And even those people with autism who cannot find the right words or cannot communicate as effectively as they want to, or their communication might not be the best and they might struggle with it, their words are still insightful, and people need to remember that. So what do you feel are like a reoccurring thing? Because I feel like there's certain things that are like reoccurring. It's like, even in like 10 years time, you know, everybody can say, oh no, hopefully it doesn't happen, it will end, it's very likely to still happen.
I think there seems to be, I guess it's that who is the expert in the room thing. And I think we're still a bit of a way away from divorcing autism and capability, certainly when we think about professionalism. So for example, when I was a practicing social worker, I had someone say to me that there couldn't be such thing as an autistic social worker, and I was standing in front of them. Yeah, that wasn't good. I questioned their assessment skills, but I think the biggest the biggest thing that that gets in the way is that, as you've kind of said, that opportunity to connect. You need to take time and make opportunity to really meaningfully connect with people before you can work effectively, and you need to do that at the different levels. So what is not going to change, I think, is the desire in our societies to have people who are less than, or who are deemed less worthy, and usually that's in a financial kind of capacity. So you know, and if we're really good in our society of compartmentalizing people and having more or less than worthy kind of segments. And I think this is where racism and ableism intertwines most beautifully, because, well, not beautifully, but, you know, effectively, because it perpetuates that myth, it perpetuates that system, that there are people who are not worth bothering about. And if you're seen as not worth bothering about, that becomes embedded in people's minds. It starts becoming, or it becomes reinforced in policy and legislation, and COVID legislation was a really good example of that. But it's you know, so until this isn't going to change overnight, but it can change if people have the will to do it. And there is good stuff that's going on. I mean, there's the training for NHS mental health services around autism that is beginning to happen at the moment. There is the Oliver McGowan training. I do have some thoughts on that, but you know, that there are steps being taken to try and do that. But as you kind of said before, there's still those assumptions that the people at the top won't or can't be autistic or other forms of neurodivergence, you know, because we wouldn't get that far, you know. So why is that? And 9 times out of 10 we don't, but it's not because we're not able, it's because we haven't been given the opportunity to demonstrate capability, because capability is a position of power, you know.
Yeah.
How you can demonstrate capability depends on the power that you are afforded to do that.
And it's also the lack of training and awareness. People expect somebody to go into an interview, for example, to be, you know, giving you eye contact, and to be like continuous, but not too intense, but not too little, not too, like gazing around, not fidgeting, straight, confident. I definitely cannot give you eye contact 24/7. If I give you eye contact, I'm more likely to look away for a longer period of time. It's success is shown in different ways. It's not how they present themselves. I feel like, you know, it's like, it's what they have and what they can bring to the table. And the thing that I also find with intellectual capabilities, like, for example, like, I think it's either the MI5 or 6 or both. And they hire people with dyslexia because they use, and because their brain works and spots patterns in an amazing way that the average person's brain can't do. And then it's like, okay, that's great, that's lovely, but are you able to meet their other needs as well? Because they can bring that to the table, but I feel like it's kind of like exploitive in a sense where people are like, oh, we would use you like this, but when you struggle, when you feel overwhelmed, and when you can't struggle, when you start portraying those signs, we're going to be like, yeah, you're not good enough for the job. It's like relationships. All relationships should be like this. You can't just be with me for the highs, you have to be with me for the lows as well, because it's not acceptable for employers just to exploit their individuals that work for them, their employees, and then be like, okay, you're having a hard time, yeah, we can replace you. We have like 15 other dyslexic people on the thing. We have 15 other autistic people. No, it doesn't work like that. That person can bring you to the table what another autistic individual can't even bring. And it's really, sorry, I will come back from it. It's really uncouth, I got to say. I just don't agree with it. And I'm like, for example, yesterday I had a meeting with this woman, and she said to me, she portrayed it as the military's views, but it seemed like her own views, but she's using the fact as military. She said that there's a good chance that I won't be able to get into the military. The military won't have me. The military won't want to work with me. They won't. And I'm like, why not? I will go above your head. I don't care. I will go above your head if you're ever going to find. If I ever even suspect that is my autism, even if you give me another reason, I will go above your head. If I want something in life, I can show you that I can do it, and I'm going to get it. So don't you come to me. And I got really emotional after it. But like, hopefully I want to do like a podcast with her, but exploring her views and things. But I feel like because it wasn't filmed or anything, she was much more free with her words. But it's like, but again, that's no excuse to think somebody, because they're autistic, they're like this, because they are like, they have ADHD, they're like this. If they're like, what people have absolutely no, they're not just like defined by their autism, they're defined by everything they've gone through, they're defined by their strength, they're defined by the fact that they can get up out of their bed and perform really well. Even get out of bed, great, lovely, whatever. So do not judge me because of my difficulties, my differences, because you want my differences. I have this amazing essay, but I can't release it because I'm using it for my GCSEs speech thing. But I wish I could share it. It was like, do not use me and do not exploit me when you want. Because trust me, I'm amazing all around. I may have difficulties, but that's what makes me me. And if you can't have both, fuck off.
And I guess the argument would be, my challenges would not be my challenges if you met my needs.
Perfect.
You know?
Yes.
And I get, so there's things about me that changing the environment or change, you know, that will not, that won't make much of a difference. It might make it a little better, but it won't make much of a difference, you know. But I know that, and I, you know, and I work with that. But there are lots of other things that if people made changes, or made changes to the environment, or how they talked about stuff, or how they expressed, how they shared information, or, you know, or things like that, then actually there wouldn't be those difficulties that people get annoyed at, let's be honest. And but a lot of these things are changeable. So, and they're abstract concepts. So, for example, being a what is professionalism is subjective. Depends on your context. It depends on your own kind of experiences of that, and it depends on your organizational's expectations around that. You know, I can be professional and not give you eye contact. I can be professional and still give you a really good assessment, but perhaps not do it or complete it in the same way as somebody else might, you know. I may not want to go and do team things outside of work, but that doesn't mean I'm not a team player, you know. So there's all of those. So it's people placing their assumptions at the door when they're thinking about what you're able to do or not able to do, you know. And in social work, that is absolutely crucial. We cannot assess what someone needs or what they're capable of doing until we've done exactly that, and then sought to connect with them in their world, in their way, to fully understand their lived experience. You know, we're not doing our jobs properly unless we do that.
So what are some of the effective ways of communication you think works? Like, we can't say for everybody, but like, you know, from like individuals with autism, and how can we ensure that communicating in a way that is respectful, clear, and accessible?
So, I mean, there are some things that I think is good practice for everybody. So we don't need the padding. That's why I was kind of say about, somebody sends me a really long email. There's no point. Just tell me what it is. What's the pertinent information? What do you need from me? Give me a time scale, you know, and make it in a font, in a text that is readable for me. I use software as well, and it needs to be readable with that. Don't privilege speech for everything. I'm not always going to be able to explain what I want to. Sometimes I'm not able to speak for different reasons, and sometimes I can't find the right words. You know, we need to agree, and you know, that's the key word, agree on different ways that we can communicate and share information. Bullet points, I love bullet points.
Yeah.
You know, and I think and again, it kind of goes back to habits and expectations around what looks good, what is deemed to be preferable. And now you think about that, it kind of you know, we talked about essays, and it's like, so, you know, I may write an essay in a format that's slightly different to what you are looking for, but I'll still meet the brief. So don't mark me down on that, you know, just because it's not how you expected it to look. Yeah. If I've met the brief, I've met the brief, you know. So yeah. So it's things like that. So it's agreeing, it's understanding and agreeing what works for that person, but things like chunkable information, clear information, nothing vague, no extra kind of narrative padding in and around those key sentences, clear deadlines if it's a task that you're asking somebody to do, and yeah, really transparent around what it is that you want that person to do as well. And because I guess one of the things that really I struggle with is if I don't understand the context of something, it's going to be very hard for me to do. So if you're asking me to do something, put it into a bit of context. So an example is, could you go and write a report on blah, 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 blah. It's needed for, and then say it will be needed by, then, and it'll be used for this. Perfect, that's fine. I know what I need to do and what it's, in what context it's situated in. But, just, vagueness and lack of clarity and lack of context are key things that could really get in the way of connecting and communicating in terms of sharing information.
I agree. I feel like when things are not clear or concise, but I feel like when people, I feel like I've noticed this, when a neurotypical asks for somebody to be clear and concise, everybody is fine with it. But as soon as they know that you have additional needs, they're like, oh, okay, this is it. And I'm like, my communication difficulties is not going to affect me as much as it affects you, because you're expecting that task of me. So it's overall just affecting you.
How can we ensure that the curriculum for autistic individuals or individuals with autism are designed to meet the needs of the whole person, including their social, emotional, cognitive, and physical development? And what are some of the challenges of taking a holistic approach to curriculum design?
Well, that is a massive question. And I guess it kind of goes back to kind of things we were talking about before around, autistic people are not a monolith. We don't have all the same needs or the same experiences. So we have to think really carefully about the messages that we're wanting to convey in the curriculum, but also how we can convey it. So, making sure that we are thinking carefully with a neuro-inclusive approach around planning where the learning is going to take place, what style of sharing of information or learning looks like, whether we need to mix it up a bit. So my argument would be, if you're wanting to try and ensure everybody can participate as much as possible, you need to have a really mixed approach to how you design and provide the curriculum that you're working with. So the challenges of that obviously are understanding that in the first place. So if we're thinking about autism, specifically, how it's, the people who are designing and delivering the curriculum, what is their understanding of autism, generally, broadly.
Very true.
Yeah, from a competence perspective, but then also what things have they built in within their own processes around developing that specifically around the cohort of students that they have, for each time as well. So it's, so that's adding a kind of a more person-centered expectation around. So I'm designing this with a kind of a generalized idea sense, but with the flexibility of making this adaptable, flexible, enabling for collaboration for everybody, regardless of what their needs are.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
Sorry, you go for it.
No, I'm just kidding. But that's hard to do because I guess you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And until we have something that is a standard expectation for education providers to have that at least basic level of understanding and scope to build that into everything that they do, I think, that's kind of the first step in doing that. We haven't even got there yet.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, we've made so much progress in the last few years, but it's still not at the space that it needs, place that it needs to be at.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about care needs, learning needs to be bespoke, and you said have to it has to have a person-centered approach. So how can we incorporate the voices and perspective of individuals with autism in the curriculum development process, such as, like through participatory research or co-design? And what are the benefits and then challenges of this approach?
Well, I guess you're not going to hear the voices and perspectives of autistic individuals in whatever organisation or forum or venue, whatever that you have, if you don't provide a space that enables them to trust you. So if you don't give the message that autistic people's voices are valid, or that you are working with a neuro-inclusive approach, that is going to be harder to achieve. People are not going to be willing to share or speak up if they don't feel that it is a safe enough space to do so. And we've touched on that before, haven't we, in some of the previous discussion, that there's a real sense of risk of speaking up if you're autistic, especially if you have, if you're an older, so if you are, say, a student and you're coming into a learning organisation and you're an older student or a more mature, we call them mature students, but someone who has more experience in terms of age and other educational experiences in work, this is I think especially hard. You've got all of that informing you that this is a risky thing to do, to speak up, even if you know that it could be something that's really beneficial to you, but also to the people that you're working with or the people that are providing the learning. It's still risky, so the organisation really needs to build in a structure that says loudly and clearly, your voice is valid, and we know that we welcome you here, you are here, and we expect you to be here, because there's quite often, and in the world of social work especially, the autistic person is often at the other side of the relationship, is the person that you are working with to support, and the person who's accessing the service, not the person who is offering the service or offering the support. So in social work education, for example, it needs to be very, very clear, like, there is an expectation we will have autistic social work students, or we will have other neurodivergent social work students. In my experience, that's something that is very, very important to lay out, to be really clear about and explicit from the beginning. Then you've got more of a chance to actually start hearing voices, because voices will feel more confident in being able to be uttered, I guess.
It's like amazing that you emphasize on the importance of working with, learning providers and the need for organizations to establish like a sort of structure that values everybody's voices. I feel like that is not done enough. And, and the fact that you welcome participants and expect, the active participation. And I feel like these are small steps. People often think, multifaceted issues require complex solution, but it really doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, exactly. There's something that it is an assumption that this is going to be challenging. Now, in some aspects, it will be challenging, because you're going to be challenging your own bias. You're going to be, I'm talking about as the learning provider, right? You are going to be challenging your bias. You're going to be challenging the structures that you already have in place. That's a good thing, because that is looking at deconstructing ableism within your own systems. That may be complicated, but it's not something to be avoided. So actually I welcome that sense of complexity that should be looked at. You should be curious about that, and if I, as an autistic learner or an autistic learning provider offers that, great, bring it on. But it is it also can be that thing of unpicking and learning and understanding what is making stuff difficult or isn't inclusive, could be complex. The solutions can be really, really straightforward, as you say. So it could just be that you enable time for processing in the session that you're offering, that it's not bombarding people with a whole heap of written information or getting them to read lots of things in a very short period of time. Nobody likes that, you know. It's like that's it's being a little bit more creative around how can I get these key messages across, but in a way that enables everybody to hear them. And as I say, that does not need to be complicated, as you put it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's crucial, like, to prioritize, cultural responsiveness and respect for diversity in the curriculum, especially when you're working with, people with additional needs, because people often think like, I lost my train of thought. People often think like, oh, so they're autistic, so they just group us and expect us to be the same, or react the same or respond the same. And they forget about the cultural, like, different cultures have different responses. Oh my God, I don't even think I sound coherent. I feel like, let me say it. I think it's like crucial to prioritize, cultural responsiveness and respect for like diversity in curriculum for individuals with autism or anybody with additional needs, or just humans in general, and like incorporating like an anti-oppressive frameworks and intersectional like perspectives. We can achieve that, and it involves people just recognizing and valuing the unique experiences and perspectives within individuals within the autistic community, including factors, such as like race, gender, and socioeconomic background, by actively, involving and listening to autistic individuals from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
And this can be done if the curricula is inclusive, is representative, and relevant to their needs and identities, and not just, one size fits all.
I 100% agree, and I think one of the difficulties, I guess, if we're looking at this from an autistic perspective, is a lot of the research that you might want to include in the curriculum is based around white male boys, in fact, white middle class male boys. A lot of it that is regularly used is UK or US situated. It's a really it's a very limiting, and 9 times out of 10, if we're looking at things in relation to children, for example, don't include the child's voice. So you're already limited with a lot of the research that may get used. However, that is developing in terms of autistic research through more autistic researchers, but in terms of kind of other intersected identities, it's still really, really limited. And I think there's still, I mean, it's talked about a lot, right? Especially in terms of higher education, about decolonizing the curriculum, about being considerate of intersected needs. But there is often, in terms of reading lists or the research or the writing that is informing that, there's a couple of things that I think we aren't getting right yet. So there's something about looking at different identities and different needs in silos, as you kind of said, and not being curious enough about the research that you're putting out, or or why we don't have a lot of research on autism that that looks at older South Asian women, right? You know, for example, it's like, why don't we have that? You know, that's the question. What is it that, what does that say about interest in intersected communities within broader communities? And in a higher education curriculum, for example, that is something that we should be really asking and looking and voicing and having that as part of our curriculum, saying, you know, just encouraging people to really unpick and explore, even if the stuff we have to hand is fairly limited, but not sandwich layering, actually really combining and
Make a cake, not a
that,
sandwich.
yes, I'm glad you said. I was thinking, what is it that I'm trying to say? But yeah, so it is, yeah, for me, it really is about, I guess, I suppose, embracing the complexity of who we are, you know, within the curriculum, making that so explicit. So you know, you don't need to have all the answers, but you are encouraging people to start asking the questions and exploring that. That's what higher education should be all about. This isn't rote learning. This is getting people to take and run with this, to really go and delve into the detail. And my goodness, as autistic people, we're good at that, right? We got a good skill in that. Let's bring it on. Let's do more of that. So you know, which is why higher education institutes need more autistic people in there, quite frankly, because we'll do that stuff. But
I feel like
yeah, sorry, no, you go.
I feel like, you know, to design curriculums that are accessible and engaging for individuals with autism, and also taking into mind that, you know, everybody has a different learning style,
Yeah,
and we can incorporate multi-sensory approaches and differentiated instruction. And, you know, this means using like a variety of sensory modalities and adapting teaching methods to meet individual needs. I feel like individualism is just a massive thing when it comes to care, when it comes to education, all life in general. Like, you know, however, like, you know, some of the challenges in implementing these approaches include, like, you know, limited resources, lack of training and understanding, and the need for flexibility within the education system, like you said. And I think it's important to address these challenges through professional like development, collaboration, and advocacy for inclusive education. And we can create this flexible and adaptable curriculum for individuals with autism by incorporating project-based or self-directed learning. And these approaches allows us individuals to explore our interests and learn at our own pace. I feel like even in specialist school, even though it's much slowed down, it's still like, oh, we need to go at this pace because the whole class is going at this pace, unless you're doing one-to-one provisions. And these challenges, again, in implementing these approaches include the need for individualized support, ensuring accessibility, and addressing potential gaps in foundational knowledge. And again, it's not just a collaboration between professionals, it's a collaboration between educators, families, and professionals to provide necessary resources and create a supportive learning environment. I feel like often some parents think, you know, education is solely a school's responsibility. And I'm like, but education is ongoing, it's lifelong. So, and anything, if you think about it, like even let's just talk about risk, because risk is one of the easiest things to talk about. It's to, you know, they've changed the framework now, but when it used to be low, medium, and high, to get somebody from high to medium, it's not one person. So you will go see, I don't know, for me, it'll be like, I'll go see my psychologist, I'll see my psychiatrist, I'll see my social worker, I might see my PA, I might see the staff that work with me. Is an active effort. And I feel like because I feel like it's like it takes a village to raise a child. And it's not just one person's job. Because if it was one person's job, well, I don't think civilization would have lasted this long.
You could well be right. But that's the interesting thing, isn't it? It's like, so I've been talking about, say, higher education here, but like as you say, education is lifelong, and it comes in so many different forms. And you know, there's research on learning styles, kind of really critiquing learning styles, as you kind of highlighted that about, you know, people talk about my learning style is this. Well, actually, it can shift and change. And so actually focusing on learning styles of an individual might actually not be so helpful as looking at learning approaches and how you incorporate lots of kind of different options within that, which I totally agree with. And I think in my own kind of experiences, having an opportunity to balance my energy so that I will be able to attend to an e-learning, for example, perhaps in a different way to the energy expenditure that is required to go to a face-to-face, you know, an in-person lecture or classroom based thing. Projects on some days might be an absolute awful challenge for me, and then greater on other ones. And I guess that's the other thing to consider, is that ebb and flow of need. So people are going to be able to engage with different things in different ways at different times. Everybody is. Autistic people, non-autistic people, depending on the other things that are coming in, the other systemic stuff that's coming in and impacting on you. You know, so being aware of that and building that in, whether that's in a primary school, whether that's in a you know, a university, is that people have different experiences for different things on different days, depending on what's happening to them. And if we're thinking about that from a trauma perspective, it's like creating spaces for people to say, today is not a good day. Yeah. How can I engage with this today? Because other stuff is going on, I won't be able to do it. And I never understood why that has been so hard to achieve in learning spaces, because you're wanting people to be engaged, you're wanting people to be open and curious, you know. So why we don't do that, I genuinely don't know, because that would benefit everybody. And then you know, people will talk about, oh, it's difficult to manage. And all that. I don't think it is, if you come in with that mindset from the very beginning, that the people who are coming to learn and the people who are offering the learning are coming into that session, to that space, to that whatever it is, with a whole heap of other things going on for them, you know, that's going to have an impact on how they learn, how they provide the learning, who they are, how they connect, everything, you know. So hold that in mind. Have that, you know, and there's that's where I guess reflexivity comes back into the equation as well. It's like, you know, people may be bored, but they may also be disengaged for lots of other reasons. People might be really enthusiastic, but it might not necessarily be for the actual topic of learning that you're offering today, but maybe how you've done it or what you've offered. You know, there's lots of different things that are beyond the kind of the core curriculum, you know, the core thing that you're learning about that day, that are so important to enable people to learn and love the learning in it, or providing the learning. It is, you know, and that goes beyond school or college or those formalized sessions, isn't it? That's learning in any context, you know. It's the learning that's the important bit, you know, more than the structure or the setup that's being provided in that sense anyway. So yeah, and it's, you know, I mean, we could do the whole different session about trauma in school, isn't there? But you know,
Oh my God.
but your point about it's never just down to one person is equally important as well. And that's, you know, people thinking about providing the learning, because I'm hoping if anybody's listening to this and they're a learning provider and they're thinking about, yeah, but that's really hard, that's really big. It's like, well, you should have support around you going, how can I make this more effective and inclusive? People who are coming in, it's like, you know, do you know what your students' situations are? Do you know who they have? It's their supports. You know, do students know that? Well, whatever age, you know, do they know who the people are that they can go to if something isn't working, practical, emotional, whatever, you know, are we making that just as explicit as we are kind of in the you need to turn up and learn this? So yeah, so yeah, and that includes in the day-to-day and everything, those communities of practice, those teams around people, those support networks are absolutely crucial for people to feel able to engage and learn and thrive and grow and all of those phrases.
That is very true. I feel like we ended in like such a perfect place. It's like, you know, collaboration, no matter what, is always key. I feel like partnership is always key. Like, you can't. I would like to think I can do things without my network, but without my network, God knows where I'll be. But like, you know, it takes a village to raise someone and a village to maintain it as well. Whether that's through childhood, adulthood, whatever. Death, I don't know. You're not going to bury yourself, are you?
Absolutely, we are social beings, I guess, as humans. You know, we are social beings, but that comes in lots of different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be gregarious and sociable, you know, but relationships matter. And yeah, and I guess is you know, I'm not an outwardly sociable person. I don't engage in a lot of social activities, but I value the relationships around me, whatever they are, however many they are, not very many, but they are important to me, valuable. And I hope that I offer a sense of value to someone else within that relationship network. But if you want to kind of go into a theory place, you know, this is you know, there's plenty research around, and I guess from an attachment theory perspective, it's one of the ultimate kind of key messages where people need a sense of security, and part of acquiring that is the networks of support around you, the networks that offer that, you know, how secure and stable are they? How many how strong is the relationships that are in there, that and what they can, you know, how we bolster each other. I guess it's not always, you know, sometimes it feels like it's a one-way kind of connection, but actually when you start unpicking it, you can see that there's a lot of mutually helpful relationships within a network that we might not always realize when we're in there, but when we step out and look into it, we can see that, you know, this is a network that survives because of the people within it supporting each other. And that's what we need to be building more, I think, within and between different autistic communities, for individuals and for the community as a whole.
Sorry.
Okay.
What advice would you give to someone who struggles to understand individuals who are different from them because they're different? They don't put as much effort, they're like, you know what, this is not my problem, sort of thing.
I would say there had kind of, I guess I talk about you know, it's really hard, isn't it? If there's somebody isn't motivated to understand that, you know, it's doesn't matter kind of, it's going to sound very defeatist, but it's like the motivation for them to understand, to get to learn, will usually come from a personal experience of theirs, or a connection, something has happened, or somebody that they know and love, something's happened with them, or somebody, you know, that's often a kind of a motivator for people to start understanding, start to learn. And I'm very reluctant to kind of say we should be pushing people to understand more if they're not there. That should never be our role, our job. We shouldn't offer, you know, that shouldn't be our labor. But there is something around offering accessible opportunities for people to learn and understand. And for me, I guess if I kind of meet someone who's a bit reluctant come into the learning space and understand more about difference generally is to just model curiosity and just go, that's, I'm curious, why do you think that? Or what is it that makes, I'm wondering I wonder where that comment came from, so it's a non-threatening but firm kind of, I heard that.
Exploring.
Yeah, I heard that, and let's go there, because that's, that isn't okay. Yeah. I think in terms of autism, it's, as an autistic person, my filter, especially when annoyed, isn't very strong. So I may be more in a position to kind of go, that's not right, let me tell you. But I think how I do that with people in relation to autism, and I say, okay, if I just share my experience on that, you might want to think about it. If I told you that, how so for example, you're saying, oh, it's so frustrating that people they're so rude. They're just kind of, I say, well, okay, let me just tell you where I'm coming from in this one. It's you see this as rude, I see this as I'm asking a question, or I'm not adding the verbal padding around what it is that actually you really need to know. I'm being direct, but direct doesn't necessarily mean the intention and around my communication with you is to understand, and not to make you feel a certain way. So let's talk about it. There's I feel kind of modeling curiosity, and but with a boundary of that isn't okay.
I feel like
Can be
somebody,
helpful.
usually people don't expect people to challenge them. But like sometimes, especially in a workplace, you need to challenge them and explore that.
Yeah.
And you need to do it in a way where it's not like very aggressive, or because sometimes, like, even constructive criticism can come off as, aggressive. And I think like non-autistic individuals can be like better support. Some like to use the word allies. I don't find that weird. Sorry. To the autistic community, but actively educating themselves about autism.
Yeah.
And seeking to understand the experiences and perspectives. I think that's what humans lack, like trying to understand other people's perspectives and challenges and experiences in life. And I feel like, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely like, I can't sometimes even think about another person's perspective, or even acknowledge that there might be another side to this. I guess with autism, it does make it hard. But by listening and learning and taking the time to learn, taking the time to listening and learning and taking the time to listen to individuals with autism and then learn from their experiences. And this can come oh, I'm tired. I haven't slept. I've been up for over 48 hours, and I'm like,
oh goodness. No, I'm not surprised the words aren't coming in. Don't honestly, it's I guess what I'm hearing, if you want some space to find your words, and tell me if I haven't heard this right, but is that yeah, it's the taking time to learn and understand and not place your own bias on it or your own stamp on it without seeking that out from the person that you are referring to, or that you're trying to, their kind of group or identity that they represent.
I feel like it gives an opportunity to challenge preconceived notions and stereotypes. And I feel like by another way is amplifying. autistic voices, giving us a space and platform to share our stories and our perspectives. And this can help elevate our voices and promote greater understanding. However, people are so stuck in their way.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Yeah, stuck in their way, like they're unable to think otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between finding it difficult to, or finding that challenging, and pure ignorance.
Yeah.
There's a very big line between that. And I feel like you said, challenging ableism, speaking up against it, and advocating for the rights and inclusion of autistic individuals, and this could be challenging discriminatory practices and promoting acceptance and accommodation, and then you can go on about supporting inclusive policies and practices, and advocate for inclusive policies and practices in education, employment, and other areas of society. I feel like, and then you engage in meaningful dialogue and stuff like that. It's like little steps lead to big results.
Absolutely. So the first thing to, I guess, for thinking about the steps, the first thing is to assume that autistic people are in the room, they're in your organisation, they're in the systems that you are operating in. So we exist, we are there. And the next kind of step is the where do your biases sit? Where is your level of understanding, and have you got a bias checking system that you've set up for yourself, if you like, to kind of reflect on as you go? And I would say reflect because I kind of talk about, if you are thinking about something, so whether it's putting something together for learning, whether it's being a social worker in a going to work with a family, whether it's engaging with a young person, whether it's as a parent trying to kind of work out what your child needs, it's that recognize your bias and put it at the door before you put it to one side, before you go and do something. But once you've done whatever it is you've done, go back. So you're not binning it. You're pulling it back, and you're re-exploring it with that new knowledge from that situation, that experience that you've just had, because that's the best way to build and learn, in my view. Is because we've all got biases, right? We've all got assumptions about stuff because we learn from experience. There's our childhood stories, there's our family history stories, our family belief systems that come into play, or other aspects of identity that impact and influence what we understand the world as. So when you have something that challenges that, you really need to unpick it, and you need to go back once you've had that new experience and unpick it again. And that's a perpetual learning process for anybody. And then you need to start looking outwards. You zoom in, and then you're going to zoom out again. You need to look at, okay, so what does that mean in relation to the people that I work with, or I live with, or I relate to? Do I need to start rethinking things or learn stuff? There's a gap here. What do I need to do? Then it's like, okay, thinking wider. Okay, so I'm now thinking about what is it that's impacting? Why is there such a high level of autistic people in poverty? I'm not saying everybody should actively think about that, but it's these types of questions. What is it that in the broader systems that are impacting on? Why is it so difficult? And we've now got current research coming out highlighting how it's so difficult for autistic people to access healthcare, even through a GP, that having conversations with GPs. These things are really, really, really important, and you might not think about it in the day-to-day, but they've got so much stuff that can inform you and your understanding, arguably both as a non-autistic person or as an autistic person. So you start looking further and further out to then come back in again and recheck your own thinking and understanding, and whatever context you're in. That's the
I
best.
feel like oh, sorry.
Oh, I listen, if you don't come in and just keep talking, you know. So please do be my boundary in that respect, please.
I feel like I was going to conclude and say that's a nice message to leave our listeners with, and how they can you know make what the fuck am I saying? I feel like oh, today's gonna be a long day.
Fine.
And I'd be like, I feel like that's a nice message to leave our listeners with. Do you have, to conclude, like, do you have any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're particularly excited about? And how can people, if you do, how can people, I'm going to say that again, sorry. Can you
Okay.
share any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're particularly excited about, if any, and how people can learn more, get involved if you do?
Brilliant. Yeah. So let's start with things that I'm currently involved with for autistic people. So I really recommend, if you are autistic and you're a parent, and you haven't already looked at this charity, disclaimer, I am currently the chair of trustees for it, but it's Autistic Parents UK. So we offer webinars and other sessions, Q&As, but also blogs, and get involved in projects. We've got a project that's going to be coming up in Birmingham in 2024, which is around supporting autistic parents understand social work, social care processes. So if you've got an interest in that, please contact me. Especially any social workers in Birmingham that might be interested is that. But generally, it's a really good charity that holds a lot of information for autistic parents, so parents who are autistic. And then another project that links to that I've been involved with is the Birth and Beyond project for autistic people. There's lots of short clips on YouTube as part of this project that go into a lot of different aspects that autistic people who are parents or are going to be parents might be really interested in. So kind of from antenatal all the way into kind of post-birth, but also or kind of early parenthood, but also kind of working with professionals and things like that. That's part of a project that was run by Dr. Amy Grant, who is an autistic researcher at the University of Swansea. So it's a really good one. So if people want to check that out. But also I and some of my colleagues from British Association of Social Work, Neurodivergence Special Interest Group, are running a number of different things over the next few months into this year around being neurodivergent and a social worker especially, and it's going to be out in different forums. That includes Think Ahead, and a few other things, so watch this space. And oh gosh, there's loads, sorry. It's like,
Okay.
we're working really, really hard to get this for me anyway, to kind of really develop the understanding of autism and neurodivergence more broadly in social work practice, but also developing more resources for autistic people around working with different agencies or in relation to who might offer support. So it's stuff that's really close to my heart and my head, and hopefully will be helpful for other people.
And finally, what's one thing that you're grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today? Having this space, I feel very privileged for having this space to be able to share my often garbled thoughts around this. And the more that we as autistic people support each other to do this, I think it can only be for the better for everybody. So thank you.
It's okay. I got to say thank you so much for filming this podcast with me, and it was really nice having you on and like seeing a perspective of someone who's a professional but also an expert by experience.
Mm.
And it's amazing all the different things that we've talked about. We spoke about so much in the last like 2.5 hours or so. It's and for those who are watching, remember you're not alone on your journey, and always seek support and embrace your uniqueness and take steps towards recovery. It might be a long process, but we'll eventually get there. Like I say, my trauma is chronic, but I'm iconic.